Silence is often misunderstood. Most people see it as absence, as emptiness, as weakness. They think silence means you have nothing to say, nothing to offer, nothing to defend yourself with. But in reality, silence is not empty. It is full. It is full of restraint, full of awareness, full of choice. In modern life, almost everything pushes you to react. Messages demand instant replies. Opinions expect immediate agreement or resistance. Emotions are broadcast publicly and rewarded with attention. The pressure to respond is constant, and over time, the pressure trains people to mistake reaction for authenticity. If you feel something, you must show it. If you think something, you must say it. If you are challenged, you must defend. This is how most people live, and this is why most people feel exhausted. They are constantly leaking energy through words, explanations, justifications, emotional displays. They speak to be understood. They react to be validated. They explain to be accepted. And the more they do this, the less control they feel. Because reaction is not power. Reaction is surrender. Silence begins where reaction ends. Not the silence of avoidance, not the silence of fear, but the silence that comes from inner steadiness. The kind of silence that does not rush to fill space. The kind that does not need to prove presence. In social situations, silence creates discomfort, and discomfort reveals truth. When you stop explaining yourself, people feel the shift. When you stop reacting emotionally, dynamics change. Not because you are manipulating anything, but because you have removed yourself from the automatic loop. Most people are predictable. They push expecting resistance. They provoke expecting emotion. They test expecting reassurance. When none comes, they are left with themselves, and that unsettles them. This is why silence often feels powerful without effort. It is not something you do. It is something you stop doing. You stop filling space unnecessarily. You stop defending your position before it is attacked. You stop translating your inner world into noise. The Stoics understood this deeply, not as a social tactic, but as a form of self-respect. Marcus Aurelius wrote about restraint, not as suppression, but as sovereignty. To remain calm when provoked is not passivity, it is authorship. When someone speaks emotionally, they are handing you their state. If you absorb it and respond in the same tone, they have transferred control. Silence breaks that transfer. It keeps your inner climate intact. In daily life, this appears in small moments. Someone dismisses your idea at work. Someone responds coldly to a message. Someone questions your intentions. The impulse is immediate. Explain, clarify, justify. But each explanation carries a quiet message that you need to be understood, that your value depends on their agreement. Silence, in contrast, carries a different message, that you are stable whether or not they approve, that your internal position does not require external confirmation. This is not arrogance, it is groundedness. The Stoics did not aim to control others. They aimed to control their responses. Epictetus reminded that we are disturbed not by events, but by our judgments about them. Silence creates space between the event and the judgment. That space is everything. In that space you regain authorship over your inner narrative. Without silence, there is no pause. Without pause, there is no choice. Without choice, there is no freedom. Most emotional suffering today comes from immediacy, immediate replies, immediate opinions, immediate reactions. The nervous system never settles. Silence allows it to settle, and when it settles, clarity returns. This is why silence often feels uncomfortable at first, because it removes distraction. It forces you to sit with sensation instead of discharging it through words. But discomfort is not danger. It is simply unfamiliar stillness. Over time, silence stops feeling empty. It begins to feel protective. You notice that not every thought deserves expression. Not every feeling requires action. Not every situation needs resolution. Some things dissolve when not fed. Silence starves unnecessary conflict. In relationships, silence often reveals imbalance. When one person always explains and the other always evaluates, power quietly shifts. The Stoic does not chase balance through persuasion. He restores it through presence, by standing firm without resistance, by remaining available without performing. This does not mean withdrawing emotionally. It means no longer negotiating your worth through words. There is a difference. Silence does not mean indifference. It means discernment. It means knowing when speech adds clarity and when it adds noise. In modern life, noise is abundant. Everyone speaks, few listen. Silence makes listening possible, and listening changes perception. When you speak less, you observe more. You notice tone shifts. You notice intentions beneath words. You notice patterns. You begin to see how often people project their inner chaos outward, and how rarely it has anything to do with you. This is a quiet relief. You stop personalizing every reaction. You stop absorbing emotions that were never yours. This is where internal authority begins, not from dominance, not from control, but from emotional independence. The Stoics believed that the highest form of power was self-command. Silence strengthens that command. Each time you choose not to react, you reinforce trust in yourself. You learn that you can feel something without becoming it, that you can experience discomfort without dissolving into it, that you can remain whole without explanation. Over time, people sense this. They may not articulate it, but they feel it. They feel that you are not easily moved, not easily provoked, not easily destabilized. And that creates a quiet respect, not the kind that demands attention, the kind that settles naturally. Silence changes everything, not because it controls others, but because it restores you. It returns your energy inward. It makes your presence heavier, slower, more deliberate. You stop living in response mode. You start living in alignment. And from that place, words become optional. They carry weight because they are chosen. They land because they are rare. They matter because they are grounded. Silence is not something to perform. It is something that happens when you no longer feel the need to prove. When nothing needs to be proven, calm appears. And calm is unmistakable. Calm does not announce itself. It does not arrive loudly or make claims. It settles. And once it settles, something subtle begins to change in how you move through the world. You notice that situations which once pulled a reaction from you now pass through with less friction. Words that once demanded an explanation no longer feel urgent. Silences that once felt awkward begin to feel neutral, even comfortable. And this is not because you have become detached from life. It is because you are no longer entangled in every moment. Most people confuse engagement with involvement. They believe that to care, they must react. To be present, they must respond immediately. To be respected, they must assert themselves constantly. But this constant assertion is not strength. It is exposure. Every emotional reaction reveals where you are unsteady. Every unnecessary explanation reveals where you are seeking approval. Every rushed response reveals where you feel pressure, and silence conceals none of this artificially. It simply removes the urge to display it. In modern environments, especially social and professional ones, people are always testing boundaries, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes subtly, sometimes directly. They interrupt, they dismiss, they question, they provoke, not always with intent to harm, but often with a desire to feel positioned. And when you respond immediately, you participate in their frame. You accept their timing, their emotional temperature, their urgency. While silence steps outside that frame, it does not resist it. It does not fight it. It simply does not enter. This is why silence often feels like control without force, because it refuses to be rushed. Seneca warned against giving others power over your inner state, not through domination but through dependency. If someone can pull an emotional reaction from you on demand, they are holding a lever. Silence removes the lever. And when the lever is gone, people adjust. They speak more carefully. They project less certainty. They reveal more than they intended. And this is not strategy. It is consequence. Because when emotional access is limited, behavior changes. In relationships, this often feels counterintuitive. People fear that silence will be interpreted as disinterest or coldness. But what actually erodes connection is volatility, unpredictable reactions, over-explaining, emotional swings. These create instability, while silence when paired with presence, creates steadiness. It says without words, I am here, but I am not unsettled. And that steadiness is grounding. It allows others to relax or reveal themselves. And it also allows you to see more clearly who respects boundaries and who only responds to emotion. This clarity is uncomfortable at first because it removes illusion. When you stop filling space, some relationships thin, some conversations fade, some people drift, not because silence pushed them away, but because noise was the only thing holding them close. And the Stoics accepted this without resentment. They did not cling to outcomes. They focused on alignment. Marcus Aurelius wrote about acting in accordance with nature. Human nature includes emotion, but it also includes reason. And silence is where reason has time to surface. It is where emotion settles enough to be understood rather than expressed. In moments of conflict, silence often feels like vulnerability. The instinct says, if I don't respond, I lose ground. But ground is not lost in silence. Ground is lost in uncontrolled reaction. Because when you react emotionally, you narrow your options. And when you remain silent, options expand. You can respond later. You can choose a different tone. You can decide that no response is necessary at all. And this flexibility is power. Not power over others, but power over trajectory. Over time, this changes how you experience yourself. You begin to trust your inner stability. You realize you don't need to narrate your thoughts to validate them. You don't need agreement to feel secure. You don't need resolution in every moment. Because some things resolve themselves when left alone, and others reveal their true shape. And silence accelerates that revelation by removing interference, allowing situations to unfold without your emotional input altering the outcome. This can feel unsettling at first, because many people are used to controlling situations through energy, through reassurance, through intensity, through persuasion. And silence removes those tools, and in their absence, authenticity surfaces. At work, this often looks like being underestimated. When you stop reacting defensively, some assume you are passive, but this assumption is temporary. Competence reveals itself over time. Noise rarely does. And when you speak only when necessary, your words carry more weight, not because they are clever, but because they are rare. In social environments, silence often creates curiosity. People fill gaps with projection. They assume intent. They assign meaning, and this is not your responsibility to correct, because silence allows others to confront their assumptions without your interference. And this is a form of psychological distance, not withdrawal, but distance. And distance gives perspective, and from perspective comes choice. The Stoics valued distance, not from people, but from impulse. They understood that the first impulse is rarely the truest one, and silence gives impulse room to fade, leaving clarity, and clarity is quiet. There is also a deeper layer to silence that is rarely discussed. Silence reveals your relationship with yourself, because when there is no noise, no reaction, no explanation, you are left with your own internal dialogue. And for many, this is uncomfortable because they have been using noise to avoid it. But silence brings awareness. Awareness brings responsibility. You begin to see where you give away energy unnecessarily, where you seek validation reflexively, where you fear being misunderstood more than being misaligned. And this awareness is not judgment, it is information. And information once seen changes behavior naturally. You don't need to force restraint, it emerges. Silence stops being something you do and becomes something you inhabit, a default state, a way of being. And from this place, interactions slow down, not externally, but internally. You no longer feel rushed to define yourself in every moment. You allow time to do that work. Time filters noise. What matters remains, what doesn't fades. Silence is not an end, it is a medium, a space where self-command grows, where reactions soften, where authority becomes internal. And once authority is internal, the external world loses its grip. You no longer measure yourself by response. You measure yourself by alignment, by whether your actions reflect your values, by whether your words, when spoken, are necessary. And this is why silence changes everything. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but permanently. Because it alters the axis around which you live, from outward reaction to inward steadiness, from noise to clarity, from urgency to presence. And presence needs no explanation. As you inhabit silence more fully, you notice subtle shifts in others. They test less, they argue less. They no longer attempt to pull you into their emotional currents. Their projections meet stillness, and stillness cannot be manipulated. This does not make you superior to them. It simply establishes a boundary that cannot be crossed without consent. It teaches them quietly that you are steady, not reactive, not dependent on their approval. In personal relationships, silence transforms interaction. Arguments lose urgency, conflicts soften. Tension dissipates when you refuse to amplify it with emotional discharge. And people speak differently when they know that words alone will not destabilize you. At work, silence carries weight in meetings, negotiations, and discussions. When you stop filling gaps unnecessarily, you allow ideas to breathe and mistakes to reveal themselves. You stop over-explaining, you stop justifying. You no longer grant every comment the power to affect your state, and your calm becomes a signal that you are present, observant, and unshakable. Socially, the habit of silence cultivates attention without pursuit. People notice what is absent before they notice what is present. The less you react, the more your presence resonates, and your energy becomes measured, deliberate, and noticeable by contrast. Silence is not passive. It is active restraint. It is the choice to withhold what is not necessary. It is the decision to preserve energy for what truly matters. And every moment of restraint strengthens the foundation of your inner authority. Internal authority manifests in your thoughts, not your words. When provoked, you notice impulses arising, but do not surrender to them. You see the initial surge of emotion and allow it to pass without contamination of action. You develop a rhythm where thought, sensation, and response are aligned. And this alignment is invisible to others, but it shapes every interaction, every choice, every perception. Silence also allows reflection. You hear your own reasoning more clearly when noise is absent. You discover patterns in behavior that were obscured by constant reaction. You understand the subtle motivations of those around you, not through speculation, but observation. You notice how often people speak to assert themselves rather than communicate meaningfully. And you perceive the difference between intention and impulse. When applied daily, silence becomes a form of self-mastery. You stop being ruled by external stimuli. You stop needing to correct misperceptions. You stop feeding the constant cycle of attention and reaction, and you live according to a rhythm defined from within. This rhythm fosters confidence, not loud, not demanding, but quiet, immovable, assured. Others sense it intuitively. It does not require explanation or performance. It simply exists, and its weight is undeniable. The Stoics valued this because they recognized the fragility of attention and the cost of emotional dispersion. Marcus Aurelius observed that wasting energy on what cannot be controlled is the root of suffering. And by remaining silent in moments of provocation or confusion, you conserve energy for reasoned action, acting from clarity rather than reaction, from principle rather than impulse. Silence is also a shield. It protects you from entanglement in trivialities. It shields your mind from emotional contagion, and it guards against the subtle erosion of patience, clarity, and composure. But silence is not isolation. It is a presence that does not intrude. It is availability without attachment. It is observation without interference. And it allows relationships, situations, and ideas to reveal their true form before you respond. With practice, silence becomes a lens through which you see reality more clearly. You distinguish between what deserves engagement and what does not. You perceive the undercurrents that others fail to notice. And you understand motives, not by guessing, but by watching patterns emerge unobstructed. The calm created through silence is cumulative. Every unspoken word and every withheld reaction strengthens the foundation of your inner state, and over time, You no longer feel reactive urgency. You feel composure, patience, and quiet authority. You act decisively because decisions are informed by observation and understanding, not immediate impulse. In moments of conflict, silence is your first response. Your mind clarifies before your mouth moves. Your energy is preserved rather than dispersed. Others' agitation meets stillness, which cannot be corrupted, and your presence itself communicates steadiness more effectively than any argument or defense could. The final realization is subtle but profound. Silence changes not the world, but the way you inhabit it. Your environment remains the same. People remain as they are. Events unfold as they do. But what changes is you, your response, your state, your authority. And in this shift, power is not sought, respect is not demanded, validation is not required. The world adjusts quietly to the weight of your presence, the depth of your calm, and the permanence of your restraint. Silence is not a tactic. It is a habit. It is a way of being. It is the natural outcome of mastery over reaction, over impulse, over the need for external confirmation. When silence is fully embraced, every word you speak carries meaning. Every gesture is deliberate. Every interaction is measured, not because you are performing, but because you have chosen not to waste energy elsewhere. And this is why silence changes everything. It does not shout. It does not demand. It simply exists. Quietly altering the rhythm of life from the inside out, it reveals clarity where there was chaos. It establishes composure where there was agitation. It cultivates respect where there was misunderstanding. It restores your mind, your body, your presence, and your ability to act without distraction. When nothing is forced, everything shifts naturally. And that is the essence of modern Stoic silence. A stillness that is alive, aware, and quietly powerful.